Hey, what are the two books behind you there?
Oh, these are books from my friends who are authors. Berna Nash has Money Out Loud, and then Jamila Souffrant, Your Journey to Financial Freedom. Both of them are well, Berna's more on social media, but Jamila is also a podcaster. So they're just two other really good, really smart personal finance people who wrote books this past year. So I'm like, I'd like to throw them up in the background, give them some support, even though they're kind of blurry.
They draw the eye, though.
They're good colors, right? They stand
sure.
out from the background.
Welcome back to Beyond the Post. I'm Rob Dunwood, and folks, we've got a good one for you this week. Bodie and I interview financial analyst turned full-time podcaster Chris Browning from the award-winning personal finance podcast, Popcorn Finance. Chris walks us through his journey transitioning from side hustle creator to a full-time creative entrepreneur with multiple shows, multiple publications, and a few TV gigs to his credit. In part one of this interview, Chris gives us a glance into how he prepared to make the pivot into running his creative business full-time and some of the steps he took to make the transition from being a part-time creator to a full-time one relatively seamless. So sit back, relax, and join us as we take you beyond the post for part one of our interview with Chris Browning. So, Chris, when we started doing a little bit of research on you, you and I have known each other virtually online. It's been a few years now, I think.
Yeah.
And, but I've always known you as Popcorn Finance and Men's Health. Those are the things that I've known you to do. Why? Because, you interviewed me on Popcorn Finance and you used quotes from me in Men's Health article and told me about both of them. Thank you, because Men's Health sent me some stuff. I appreciate that.
Oh, nice. They didn't send me anything. Hold up. You getting stuff? I didn't get anything.
Well, they sent you a check. They sent you a check. I didn't get a check. But one of the things that our listeners are always really interested in is people who have made the turn, as I will call it, those who have taken something that they were doing on the side. If I'm correct, I think you started Popcorn Finance back in 2017.
Yeah, that's
so
correct.
You're moving into year 8 now. Was Popcorn Finance, was that your first foray into podcasting, or is that just the one that has stuck the longest?
It was my, I think it was my second jump into the world of podcasting, but I think my first serious one, back when I was in college, it would have probably been 2009. I had a friend, he was doing a video game podcast that no one ever listened to. This thing never got off the ground, but I remember him and his other friend were working on it, and then they let me listen to it. And I said, this editing is trash. This is horrible. Let me work on this, because I just like making, I love doing things with audio and video all the time just for fun. So I just became their editor. I just volunteered myself. And then eventually they were like, well, you just want to come on the show? So I did that for a few months. We were just I don't even know how long it lasted, but that was my first time ever doing a podcast. It was still, it had been around for a while, but it's still relatively new. Most people weren't really listening to podcasts back then. But Popcorn Finance, which I didn't start until basically, 8 years later, is, I say, my first real serious attempt to try to do something, especially something on my own that was like my own original idea.
How did you come up with the concept of Popcorn Finance? Because it's a really neat idea.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was. So the whole premise is discussing finance and the time it takes to make a bag of popcorn, because the show's a very short form show. And I actually came up with the premise first before I came up with the name, because at the time when I started it back in 2017, there weren't really a lot of short form podcasts. There's a ton of them now, but back then there weren't too many, especially in the money space. And so for me, it was I kind of wanted a show like that. I was interested in having like a little short show that I could listen to. So that's where I came up with the idea of you know what, I'm going to do this for really quick, in and out. But then I was like, what's going to be the premise and what's going to tie it all together? And I think one day I was just sitting around brainstorming, writing down ideas. And then I kind of just thought popcorn, you put in the microwave. Microwave is always a short timer. That could be my thing to connect it. Popcorn Finance. I could talk about money in this short period of time. Now, do I talk about it over a longer length of time than it takes to make popcorn? Yes, most of the time. But I'm making a couple bags. That's my justification. I got one microwave. I need 3 bags. So it's going to take a little time to make my way through it.
So one of the things that I wanted to, just really get to is that you started doing Popcorn Finance back in 2017. You definitely picked a good niche. If you talk about health, wealth, love and relationships, and just happiness, those 5 things, you're onto something. And excuse me, you kind of changed the paradigm a little bit. It's most of these financial shows, because I was listening to them back in 2017, they were half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours long. You come in with episodes that are 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes. So it was something that was very different. So was it an immediate thing to where things just kind of took off for you? Or, was it a grind like many podcasters go through? What was your ascension to the point to where you said, you know what? I think I like doing this more than I like going to work every day.
Yeah, it was a grind. There were many times in there where I thought about, why don't I just stop doing this? Like, I'm not getting paid to do this. Why don't I just stick with my day job that I already got, and I can have my nights and weekends back? Because it took a while. I'd say even the first 2 years, it was very much it was a labor of love. It was just a passion project because it wasn't bringing in anything, and it was growing very slowly. Even to this day, I've never had a viral jump up where all of a sudden my downloads doubled or something like that. It's always been a very slow incremental growth in downloads. And so in the very beginning, it was me trying to figure it out. What is this show going to be? How do I want to present topics? And it's a lot of trial and error. You just try stuff, see if it works, see if it doesn't. I started reaching out to people, having guests on the show. I tried different concepts, but it was still just this very slow thing that was just always a side project. And I think it was in my second year, I almost stopped doing the show because I was just getting burnt out. I was, working a full-time job, 40 hours a week, family, friends, relationship. I was every night, every weekend, I always had something I needed to do because that was the only time I had free to work on it. So it got to the point where I was like, well, what is the point of this? Am I doing this because I like it? Am I doing this because I want it to be something? What am I doing here? And the thing that actually kind of saved the show and kept me doing it, I remember I was in this Facebook group because I would go to this finance conference where it's these people who all do media around personal finance, podcasts, bloggers, YouTubers. And there was someone who posted in there about, they were journalists and they were looking for someone to talk about their story with paying off debt. I was like, yeah, I'll do that. I'm happy to hop in, connect with her. She ends up interviewing me. And then I met her when I went to the conference that year and I had her on my show. And then she was like, hey, I have some friends who are working on this article about Black personal finance creators in the space for Black History Month. Would you be okay if I threw your name out there? And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, sure. Definitely. No problem. Her name was Liz Weston, by the way, a great journalist. And so she put my name over there. I guess they liked the work I was doing. And I got put on this article with this like 5 or 6 other really great creators in the space, in the personal finance space. And from that, it was almost like the slow snowball of you get that one media mention and it was just an article on NerdWallet. And then someone else found it. And then, a few months later, I get another article interview. And then a few months later, someone reaches me about doing a little news spot. And it wasn't I got a lot of work and I was super busy, but it was just I started getting at least a little win every few months that kind of kept me motivated.
That's really interesting because what it sounds like you're saying was that you were churning, you were basically grinding for more than a year, well into year 2. And then something just happened and you had a catalog. So now, oh, hey, would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? And people can always go back and see, well, there's a catalog there. This is somebody who's been doing this for a minute. We can at least trust the fact that they've been around for a while. And there's a catalog that we can go and listen to see if they're saying stuff that makes sense. So I think that that's a very, very important lesson that podcasts in general, from a media standpoint, they do not generally take off fast. Some do. Yeah. But generally, it is more of you are grinding for a minute until just the right contact, the right network, acquaintance that you bump into is able to say, oh, why don't you talk to this person? And because you have the catalog, then the ball kind of gets rolling.
Yeah. Also it was, I got the reps in because if they would have come to me in the very beginning, that first 6 months, I was so rusty. So not rusty, but I was so inexperienced. I was still learning how to do this and find my comfort level, I guess, for it to feel a little natural for me, that I probably wouldn't have been maybe ready to handle it in a professional way. But because I've been doing it for a little bit longer, it just kind of helped me be a little more comfortable and confident when they would ask me questions. I had that year and a half of just doing this back and forth, having these conversations.
Modi, what is our quote that we say all the time? Repetition builds reputation.
Yeah, or that what you do most is what you'll do best.
Yeah, that sounds like what it was for you. You got to the point to where I just keep doing this over and over and over again, and it's one of those things to where you can literally just improve a little bit. What was your cadence back then? Were you doing just 1 episode a week, 2 episodes a week? What were you doing?
Just 1 episode a week, so I wasn't even that much.
So you had over 50, 50 times where you were able to get a little bit better. So just think that if you just improved 1% every single time that you recorded a new episode, you're the financial guy. I'll let you do the amortization calculator on that. But I'm guessing that if you get 1% better over 50 some odd weeks, you're a lot better after a year than you were than when you started. So that probably went into it as well.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
But other than sets and reps, do you have a kind of a recommendation on how to start to feel comfortable? Like that's a lot of people will start with an audio podcast, and they'll kind of get to a point where they can hear their own voice, and then you put a camera in front of them, and this is true for me. Put a camera in front of them, and then all of a sudden it's like, just like staring off into space. Like your brain leaves your body. Yeah. Did you have any techniques that you used to become comfortable with that?
Oh, yeah, no, there was a few things I did. And I definitely get what you're saying. Cause it's one hurdle getting over listening to yourself over and over again. And it's another thing watching yourself on video. Cause you're going to be your own worst critic. You'll be picking everything apart. But for me, I think that the single biggest thing for both of those things was I always listened and watched back to everything that I did. I would watch my interviews. I would listen to the episodes I recorded. If I was a guest, I would listen to those. And as painful as it was sometimes to listen back, because you see all the flaws, all the mistakes, like, oh, I would have done this better. Oh, I shouldn't have done this. I look weird. Why was my face doing this thing? But all those things, for me, I took it as, okay, that's something I just need to be mindful of. What are my crutch words? Do I keep saying over and over again? Do I say like? And you start to pick up on those things, not to become overcritical or too in your head, but it just becomes like a learning tool. You kind of study yourself. You're like, okay, these are the things where I think I could get better. Like, yes, this wasn't great. Maybe there's some things I had issue with how I came off, but now I know, and I can just keep that in my mind. That's why I think the frequency helps too. If you're constantly reviewing your work, then those things, you kind of get those in the back of your mind of like, okay, these are my issues. These are my things I need to work on. And you just slowly start to figure out what those things are. Like, okay, one big thing was I would be afraid to pause for too long. So I would say, all the time, because it gives you that moment to think. But in reality, when I look back at it, those times where I actually did pause, the pause was way shorter than it seemed like. I thought I paused for about 5 minutes, but in reality, it was like a fraction of a second. It was like nothing. It was almost not even noticeable. And then I'm like, okay, now if I need to think, if I need a second, I can pause and no one's even going to care. No one's going to notice because I didn't even really notice when I did it. And I think it's just such a great study tool, just watching yourself. And then eventually you don't even care. It becomes just like watching a stranger. You're you're not even thinking about it. You just get so comfortable with hearing yourself and seeing yourself that it doesn't even freak you out anymore. And it becomes a great way to learn about how you present and come off. Even to this day, I still will watch back everything I do. And then that way I can kind of give myself some notes. Okay, I can see where I could have improved a little bit right here.
Yeah. Early on, I received some really good criticism because I did the same to you as I wouldn't want any pauses. Yeah. It was just like bang, 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 bang. And somebody wrote in and they said, this podcast moves so fast. I don't even have a chance to think about what you just said. Mm-hmm. And it's because I wasn't putting any pauses in there. So you put a 2-3 second pause. The buffering that's going on in your listener's brain gives them a chance to catch up, form their own thoughts, form their own opinions, and then you can move on to the next thing. So the pauses can be used for dramatic effect. Like I listened to one podcast where it seems like the host, it's probably only 6 or 7 seconds, but it seems like he pauses for 30 seconds. And what I find myself doing, this is genius, what I find myself doing is leaning forward and wanting to know what's coming next. And he doesn't do it all the time, but he does it for effect. And pauses are a really effective tool in increasing engagement.
Ooh, that's a good point. I'm not doing that.
Larry King was the master of that. Where he would just let there be uncomfortable silence to the point to where it was like, I've watched enough Larry King videos to go back, because I think that when it comes down to doing interviews, he is one of the best who have ever done it. I would put him into that category. Believe it or not, Howard Stern is a ridiculously good interviewer. David Letterman is a ridiculously good interviewer, and they all use they all three of them use uncomfortable silence. But Larry King was especially adept at it, to where he would just let you say something and then just sit back and let the guest actually, you see them looking up and left. Okay, what am I supposed to do now? I just said this. And then they would go through and then give you more, which is all that he wanted. And then he would come in with this point. So yeah, silence is a great tool. But let's move forward because, you said you grinded for the first couple of years of your show. But what did it look like when you started to say, you know what? I think I might be able to do this full time. What before you get to full time, but you started to see the signs that it was a potentiality for you. It was something that could be possible. What did you start to notice, or what were you looking for? What were you putting in place to try to get yourself ready for making that kind of move?
Ooh, what's funny is that by the time I made the move, I was actually at a job that I really liked. When I started the podcast, I was at a job I hated, and I'm kind of happy that it took me a while to get my footing, and I had changed jobs before I kind of felt better about where I was with the podcast. 'Cause I probably would have quit prematurely just because I hated my job so much. I was like, I would have taken any opportunity. Give me $6. I'm out of here. I'm gone. But what ended up happening was I was like, as I was learning about how the podcast worked and the avenues I could make money, it was like, okay, what do I need to do? What things do I need to learn? What skills I need to bring in? What opportunities do I need to have show up for me to feel like this could be a business? Because it was more so just like a project I enjoyed doing. I loved making the podcast, which is like a fun thing that was like, okay, this was like a topic I'm interested in and a creative process for me. And I think it was maybe in that third or fourth year, maybe, I'd say late second year, I got my first sponsor ever. And then it was like the slow process, like getting another one here and there. And then it was like, oh, I can do speaking work. And because that's the thing that happens pretty often is like with people's personal finance space, where you'll get asked to do like a lunch and learn for a company. You come in and like talk to the staff about retirement plans or saving and benefits and things like that. And so I was taking these opportunities to kind of learn these different avenues, whether it's like affiliate marketing, podcast sponsorships, speaking, doing video work for other people. So companies would, every now and then I would get like a deal to go and do like a personal finance video for a company or to talk about a certain product or thing like that. And so I was starting to slowly figure out, oh, these are the avenues that you can make money. It's not all the same because, and I would talk to other people who were doing the same thing as me. And I realized that everyone's doing some random mixture of things. Everyone's doing some combination of different jobs and little side hustles that kind of build up their income. And so for me, it was once I started to build up those things and learn which ones I liked and which ones I didn't, to where I was like, okay, the thought started creeping into my mind. Okay, if this gets a little more consistent, then I'll feel a little more comfortable maybe stepping away from my day job. But I'm so risk averse. I was like, I got to feel real stable. I have to feel real comfortable this is going to continue long term. So one thing I did for sure was build up a savings account, build up my emergency fund, like just in case I don't want to end up on the street. So let me make sure I have myself in a secure spot to where I feel like I can handle like a bump in the road or, a contract could always fall through or end prematurely.
It definitely was something that came across my mind because I'm like, well, you're a financial analyst. This is your business. This is what you do for a living. It's helping people figure out how to plan for, their future financially. And you're deciding that, yeah, I'm going to stop making all that money and I'm going to go do this other thing. So I could only imagine that you being in the financial space, it was not you know what? I got a sponsor. I'm quitting my job. You probably put a lot of thought into it. So were there things that you did, as far as, okay, I want to put savings in place. I want to, here's the number that I need to make, because here's one thing that I've always understood about when you have a side hustle and a full-time job is that you can quit neither one of them and make the same money immediately. Unless there are the folks who, well, I got this contract and that contract was going to make so much, I was able to quit my full-time job. But that's usually not how it happens. Usually it is, okay, I've gotten to the point to where I have no more time. I am selling my time to this 40-hour a week that's usually 50 hours a week, to a place. And if I had that 50 hours to put towards the thing that I truly want to do, then I could catch where I'm making with both of these things right now and eventually pass it. I'm going to imagine that you as a financial, a professional, you really kind of thought about that. So what are some of the things that you did to prepare yourself to be able to make the move? Because you just don't strike me as somebody who, I got a sponsor. I'm about to dip. I'm out of here. You don't strike me as somebody who that's what you did. And the fact that you said you didn't do that probably helps it as well.
Yeah, no. I like having health insurance and be able to pay my bills. So I was like, you know what? I got to really wait this out and see. So for me, I think some of the biggest things that I ended up doing was one, like I said, building up the emergency funds. I had some savings sitting there, so I felt a little more comfortable. And the other thing was that I did was I ended up kind of seeing what opportunities were coming my way and how consistent they would be. So I kind of looked at what contracts were coming through, whether it was like a speaking gig or like a brand partnership to see if any of those would be sustainable. And for me, I live a very kind of like, I say like modest life. I'm not a big spender overall. And so I already kind of had built into my lifestyle like a buffer, right? I was like saving larger portions of my income and living on a lower amount than I actually was making. And so it gave me the freedom to be like, look, if for a period of time my income falls a little bit, I still know where that line is I need to be above to still live a comfortable life and not feel like I was like, struggling. So for me, I was like, okay, as long as like, okay, I had a car, it was paid off. I'm not going to buy another car. I'm going to just stay with this one, rock with this one. I don't really go out and do a ton when it comes to traveling. Like cash, I will use like travel points to do like airline and hotel miles to do travel when I want to do that. So I had all these things I was doing already to keep my expenses low. And that just took the pressure off of me. I was like, as long as I can keep my life affordable, it takes so much pressure off of the business and me to have to like rush and maybe even make compromise choices. Cause sometimes you'll take a deal that maybe you don't want to, or you don't believe in, just because you're like, I need the money. And it's like, the more I can do to prevent myself from being in that position, the better. So that was some things I set up myself up financially to just kind of protect myself. So I felt comfortable. And then the thing that really gave me the push, because you kind of mentioned a little bit, like sometimes you get like a contract or something that comes through that makes you feel like, okay, I'm good. I started working for a credit union. I do this series called Money Burst. And it's like basically like a very similar thing that I do with my podcast, but I do it for a credit union on the East Coast. And it's this like really cool project, great people to work with. And when that came through, we started working together for an extended period of time. And I was like, oh, once it starts, I don't know if I can keep my day job and do this at the same time. It's getting too busy right now. I feel like something's going to suffer. One of those two jobs is going to suffer if I'm not careful here. So that was my decision. I was like, look, I feel like this plus everything else I'm doing, I feel comfortable with where I'm at, with where my expenses are, that I can step away and give this a shot full time and see how I like it. And also in the back of my mind, knowing like, look, if this doesn't work out, if for some reason I get out and like, I don't like this, or it's not as stable as I think it is, or I didn't plan as well as I thought I would, I can always go back and get a day job. Like I'm not going to be out of the game that long that I couldn't get a job if I really needed to. And I know what my skill set is when it comes to working. So that's when I was like, I thought about it for a while, for months. I thought about it after I knew this was going to happen. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. I feel like I prepared as best as I can. Let me see how this goes. And it's worked out so far. It's been a fun ride being on this other side of like not doing my day job like I used to, and doing a little more creative work.
So you mentioned Money Burst. I was going to bring that up. But you mentioned that, and I will just say that, Money Burst and Popcorn Finance are not all that you do. So let's see here. Let's just go through some of it. So, you host, This Is Awkward with Allison Baggerly. You write for Men's Journal. You have a weekly segment on NBC LX. You've been featured and contributed to CNBC, PBS, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, and Forbes. And most importantly of all, you referee paintball matches. I mean, that is the most impressive thing on the entire resume.
That's an old one. That's an old one. I haven't done that one in a while.
But you did it. You can never be taken away from you. You did it. So my question is, how are you juggling all of that? Because I think a lot of times, I've been podcasting now for, in next month, I will be moving into my 19th year of being a creator of podcasts. I've been creating content since the 90s, since I was in college. So, I go way back. And I can tell you that there, a lot of people think that the amount of time that you put into creating a podcast, creating a YouTube video, writing an article is the same amount of time that it takes them to consume it. No. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. So when you are doing all these things that I know to be very, very time consuming. I mean, you are a full-time creator, but where are you finding time to do all this? Because like I said, it's not just a little bit. You've got multiple shows, you're writing for multiple publications, you have regular things where you're showing up on TV every week. Where are you finding the time to do all of that stuff?
Ooh. You got to add in there too. I still do some consulting work as a financial analyst from time to time. So I still will dip my head in there and do some spreadsheets for some companies, just to add more work on my plate here. But it is, it can be hard sometimes. And look, I'm not the most organized person in the world by any means. And I found myself sometimes overcommitting. And I think that's something I had to learn, that I had to be a little more realistic with the time frame it takes to do things, right? Because even someone like myself who's been doing this for a little while, not as long as you, but for a little while, you sometimes still underestimate how long it takes to do something. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could do this. And then next thing I know, I'm up at 2 a.m. trying to finish up something and hit a deadline. So it still can happen to me. But for me, like the one thing I've had to change to help myself be a little more organized is I rely heavily on my calendar. So everything I do, I put it in my calendar, and it has to be there, because if it's not there, I will forget all about it and it will not happen. And I've tried time blocking. I'm not the best at that. I just, because I forget the time. I need to put it on my calendar to time block so I can time block. But it's what I did, at least have it written down somewhere. And then what I try to do is at the beginning of the week, just do a scan through of the week. Like, okay, what is coming up? What things do I need to do? What things should I be prepped for, or have in the back of my mind that I need to be just like kind of mulling it over so I'm ready for it? Give me a little preview of the week. And for my video or audio projects that I'm working on, those I put everything in ClickUp. It's the project management software that I use, and that's what I use. I have the board, what they call a Kanban. I forgot the name of it, where it has like these columns, and then you give like a little card to each of. So every episode I have has its own card, and within that card it has the due date for when I need to get it done, the release date, who's the guest, if there's any images or audio files that go with it, communication back and forth with a VA that I work with, a virtual assistant who helps me with some of the show notes and things like that. And so that bit of organization for that, and YouTube videos and social media videos, that helps me because I have to see it. I'm very visual when it comes to this stuff. And so those are some of the things. The calendar and that together help me keep things on track as best as I can. I still miss some deadlines sometimes, but that's what I need to kind of help me at least get a grasp on what's coming up and what I should be doing.
Chris, I would go ahead, Bodie.
Sorry, Rob. Do you do your own editing?
I did for the longest time. I only started using an editor about 3 years ago for my podcast. So the first 4 years I did all my own editing. And then 3 years ago, I finally handed it off, which was a good idea. I should have done it a little bit sooner.
All right, everybody, we are going to end part 1 here, but don't worry, there is a part 2. And in part 2, Chris tells us more about how he found the right editor and virtual assistant for his show, and the importance of handing off work so that you can concentrate on creating and doing other projects. Chris is also going to talk about how he automated his workflow to not only free up more time for himself and build a better communications pipeline with his team, but some of these automations actually save the guest time. So make sure to check out part 2 of our interview with Chris Browning. And by the way, I'm going to put all of Chris's links in our show notes if you want to check out what he is doing. But again, you can go to popcornfinance.com. You can find all of his social media links, how to subscribe to his podcast. And then he's just got a bunch of really helpful resources up there as well. Chris has got a great website. Again, that is popcornfinance.com.